Hey everybody, I'm Reggie Williams, founder and CEO of Ambrosia for Heads, and with me I have Jake Payne.
Yo, hold on, man. I can't do
And his mom.
uh, uh, how is this gonna work? Oh
That's
man.
right, man. Just turn back around and be orange. It's all good, man.
Yeah, man. I'm gonna do that.
I think hip hop will always be a voice for the people.
Hey everybody, I'm Reggie Williams, founder and CEO of Ambrosia for Heads, and with me I have Jake Payne, our editor in chief, and together we are What's the Headline, the podcast. How you doing today, man?
Man, I'm doing well. I got this like Martin Scorsese taxi driver lighting. So yeah, man, I feel like I'm in a gritty, 70s grindhouse film.
Yeah, we all have to become professional filmmakers in this Zoom culture,
Yeah, man. Especially when we're on the road, like that's the trick of it. I've done Zoom meetings, from my car, and we did that interview with the Locks, and I laughed because Styles P was like switching lanes, doing the interview, and still came out dope.
You're with your mom, right?
I am. I got my COVID test, and I've been low key with my parents. I'm out here in Pittsburgh for a minute, and yeah, it's been nice to be around family after a year where I really didn't see them too much.
And what's your mom's Zoom etiquette? Is she like trying to be all in the video, like
Yeah,
dancing
my
and shit?
mom's my mom's got some like 97 Dame Dash, Jermaine Dupri, Puff Daddy, and me, I wish she had more of a Suge Knight stance personally, because that's how she was when no, I'm kidding.
Yeah,
But yeah.
she's just trying to function, man.
Have you had I mean you're a father, have you had any children interrupt the Zoom meeting?
I haven't had children. I've had one of my sons. He'll like make a cameo or two. It's usually my dog though, just barking his head off. This dude
Yeah.
was crazy. Like he's a wild one. So
I mean, you see it in the podcast with mine. You remember that sketch on In Living Color when Jim Carrey would be in the background of the newscast, like always trying to get
lurking,
on.
like,
That's how Theo does, man. If it's not a bark, it's a cameo.
but he's quiet at least. He's typically like just like kind of just hanging out. He's just like a quick one just to let you
Yeah,
know he's there. So
yeah. He's trying to get discovered, man. He's looking for that come up.
yeah, what a year, man. Everything has changed.
Yes, indeed, man. Crazy time. So, it's
Well,
funny. You and I debated, whether we would have this episode. Obviously, the last episode we presented our year end, longest podcast
in
we've ever
history.
done. Yeah. Damn. Yeah. That was the apocalypse now of podcasts. But it was dope, and I was really, really proud of it. I heard a lot of good compliments about our list. Definitely got some, as happens every year, we anticipated some people telling us where we got it wrong. And I think in our headline, we leaned into that. We want to know that. We want to create that discussion, because at the end of the day, it's not about who you forget. It's about creating a conversation,
Yeah,
just to
what was some of the
celebrate
ones
music.
you saw? What were some of the recurring ones that you saw that people thought were
Man, I
amazing?
saw a lot of people that were coming for our throats with pause with RA the Rugged Man, All My Heroes Are Dead. And RA, unlike so many artists today, takes long, we were talking 5+ years between projects. And we started supporting this campaign when we were still publishing on the daily. And there's a lot of great things I can say about that album. There was a lot of albums that you and I both on the podcast and in the lead up were very very supportive of, that didn't make the list. So that was one. Conway the Machine, From a King to a God, was another. I mean, we had Conway on last year's list, courtesy of the Griselda album, and this year we had one from Gunn, one from Benny. Not to say that has anything to do with Conway, but we definitely, I think are frontline supporters of the Griselda movement. And the other, it was, Elzai and J.R. Swift, which I know we spent some time talking about on the podcast. I like the album. I know you made some points about just, how it was mixed and things like that stuck out to you, which I went back and listened to the project, and I thought those were very valid points you made. And the other, man, we got, it's so funny when artists get involved too. We had some members of Arrested Development, not Speech, but other guys that, you know, told us we totally dropped the ball on Arrested Development's new album, which I listened to when it came out. But it's funny because I would imagine more than any publication, you and I, you know, are two AD fans, you know, legacy.
Yeah, for sure, for sure.
And if nothing else, you know, that discourse makes me go and revisit, you know, Arrested Development's album, and it makes me revisit all of these things. But I saw a lot of support, you know.
You know, it's interesting. It's interesting that people care. I think it's a great thing that people care, and actually, to me, it's an honor because you know people could easily just say, "Who are these dudes?" Like, you know,
Yeah.
why does this publication matter? Like, you know, but the fact that people care, I believe, shows that we've earned some respect in the space and that people value our opinion. And so, I'm actually going to call an audible. You know, we got a kind of a run of show that we want to cover, but I think we should open it up with Grammy nominations. Now, this happened 3, 4 weeks ago now, but we've
Mhm.
always been a publication to not necessarily be first to like discuss something, but try to discuss it in the most thoughtful and comprehensive way possible.
Mhm.
Um, and then also, you know, there's a Lifetime Achievement Grammy too that I think makes this storyline current and relevant again. So let's talk about the Grammy nominations. You know, first of all, the Grammys have always been a very complicated thing for hip hop. Jazzy Jeff and Fresh Prince won the first rap Grammy ever. At the time, they were considered to be pop, very commercial rap, and even though their albums and Will and Jeff were very popular, you know, in the hip hop community, people saw songs like "Parents Just Don't Understand" and things like that as being very um, you know, kind of hip hop light, not like the hardcore stuff that was going on, like the Run DMCs and the LL Cool J's and you know people like that of that era. And so there's always kind of been this love hate thing, but people also, as much as they, you know, Public Enemy, you know, Chuck Flavor Flav, you know, had his famous song "Who Gives a Fuck About a Goddamn Grammy."
Mhm.
You know, the thing is, that even though people say that, it's a duality. On the one hand, people think that, but on the other hand, people feel really a certain kind of way whenever they're snubbed, or if an album that they think should win, like a Good Kid, Mad City over Macklemore's album, you know, doesn't get it. People really feel a certain way, you know. So, um, you know, it ties into the thing I was mentioning before about validation and like, you know, how people feel about our list. The reality is people want validation. Artists want validation for their work, whether it's from the fans or from the culture or from, you know, some like publication or some organization. People want it, or else, you know, these things wouldn't exist. There wouldn't be Grammy Awards and BT Awards and MTV Music Awards and all that. So the Grammys this year, um, give me some of your takeaways from the nominations.
Yeah, well, I want to add one thing to what you said that I learned and didn't previously consider. You know, I was listening to the Joe Budden podcast a few weeks ago, and they had Summer Walker's manager on there, who I believe also manages West Side Boogie, who we've covered a lot, and Black. And he was saying, you know, Grammy awards and nominations are also opportunities for artists to raise their prices, so to speak, raise their value when they're going to brand partnerships or when they're doing touring. So, I mean, there's very real financial implications too. And you're right, that just speaks to this complicated relationship and duality of, on one hand, we know that these awards are not entirely merit based, but on the other, they can be kingmakers to some extent, and or queen makers, you know, and there's a lot of reverberating impact. And I know, just as a damn near 20-year journalist, which artists to write Grammy winning and Grammy nominated with. Like, that is, you know, it's part of an artist's thumbnail bio. So that being said, you know, this year's really interesting because as far as I can tell, it's going to be a first time winner regardless in the best rap album category, which is always, when the nominations are announced, that's always where I go first, just as a fan. And I think, you know, in the post Macklemore era, when the Grammys, I think, really felt some heat in this category, it's always been interesting. I mean, in the last few years, we've seen you know, Nipsey Hussle, while he was still alive, get a nomination. We saw, you know, Pusha T get a nomination. We've watched, you know, Rhapsody, which I think a lot of folks, you know, with Layla's Wisdom, were so pleased to see. And, you know, there's a lot of recognition that I don't think was always there. And I definitely think that's true of this year, regardless of what album we all individually feel should win. So, you know, we have Gibbs and Alchemist, Alfredo, which, you know, we included in our list. We have Nas, King's Disease. We have Royce the 5'9", Allegory, Jay Electronica's album. And what's the other one I'm missing?
Let's see. It's a newer artist, right?
It is, and I'm looking. Bear with me one second, because it's one we talk. Oh, D Smoke.
Right. D Smoke. Yeah.
You know, which again we spent some time talking about on our list, and I believe that is that's it. Am I correct?
Yeah, I think so. So
no matter what in this category, this is a first time winner. You know, for their own merits, and you know, Nas is. We've spent years talking about that. I mean, like Snoop, like Ice Cube, Nas has never won a Grammy, and that's crazy, because I mean, you know, he's a, you know, arguably top 5, top 10 MC of all time, and to not have that recognition. So this is a big stage for Nas, and this is a year that I feel like he stands a good chance to compete. Whereas in other years, and let's be clear, the Illmatic, you know, that did not exist at the time of Illmatic, the best rap album. You know, so this is a really important stage and a big night for Nasir.
So who do you think takes this one?
I think it's going to be Nas. I cannot imagine, you know, just optics wise, you know, you and I spent a lot of time. I mean, Jay Electronica is billed as his album, but Jay-Z played as much of a feature role on that album as Ghostface did on the Purple Tape. So what does that look like if Jay Electronica wins? And also, I mean, Jay Electronica is such an enigma. Does he even show up? So I think it's a big night for Nas. I mean, you asked me my album of the year last week, and I went on here and I said Royce the Allegory. I really am happy if Royce wins, but truthfully, I'm happy about all these albums. You know, I would have loved to have seen Benny on the list. I don't think Busta Rhymes was eligible given how late in the year he dropped. But, you know, there's not one I'm rooting against, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I haven't seen the dates, but it's not certain to me that even Benny was eligible, because he dropped pretty late too.
Yeah.
But if he was, that was definitely an oversight. You know, so I alluded to this before, but one of the things that brings us back into the discussion is Grandmaster Flash and the Furious 5 are now being awarded a Lifetime Achievement Grammy. And this is something they did with Public Enemy a few years ago. And, you know, I'm very mixed about this. You know, on the one hand, I think it's phenomenal that these artists are finally getting the recognition that they deserve. The Grandmaster Flash and the Furious 5 were the first rap act inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. There's a lot of controversy around that, because people are like, does hip hop belong in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame? And that argument exists kind of on both sides. You know, on the rock side, and people are like, you know, being purists. And on the hip hop side, people are like, why do we need validation from the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame? But the fact is that there is no other kind of museum or, you know, Hall of Fame for music. Like it's really it's become the Music Hall of Fame. Like they should just go ahead and rename it, which I think would solve a lot of things. And, you know, just call it the Music Hall of Fame and put everyone in it. But, you know, that being said, you know, name change, you know, aside, that was a great thing to see them in there, and it ushered in a wave of hip hop artists that have followed since. For Grandmaster Flash and the Furious 5, and, you know, even that name is a bit strange, because Flash was the DJ, which was great, and we all know that DJs led the culture back then and led the music. But we all know that Grandmaster Melly Mel was a huge part of the reason why that group ascended to what it became. You know, the other members being Cape Cowboy, Raheem, Scorpio, Mr. Ness, and Cape Creole. the song that kind of put them on the map, being the message, was one of the seminal rap songs. It broke through to the mainstream. It changed rap from which was predominantly a party format back then. Chanting, a lot of like singing on the choruses and like rapping over disco beats and stuff like that, to something that was a real political statement. Like it became the voice of an entire group of people. It became the voice of the streets, and it really gave people insight into what life was like in the South Bronx and many um, you know ghettos across the country. It was that song that I think put rap on the map, not just Grandmaster Flash and the Furious Five. So for them not to have gotten a Grammy or some sort of recognition before, you're scratching your head and wondering, because that song was released back in 1982, I believe.
Yeah.
So we're coming up on nearly 40 years, and so it. So but it's great that they're being recognized now. But you wonder, and then the other thing is they're way beyond the message too. They have White Lines, which is a similar kind of social commentary. Melly
And
Mel
also a
talking
dance
about
record too, at the
dance
same time.
record, talking about the ills of like drug addiction. Something that you didn't hear too much back then. And it's ironic given how much hip hop now pushes drug usage. Think about that. One of the first songs in rap music to talk about drugs was very much a PSA against drug consumption. And now, like almost every song is advocating strenuously the use of drugs. Like,
Yeah.
how do we get to that point? But then Scorpio was, to your point, was that was like a electric.
Electro funk.
Electro funk, yeah. That was back in the day. You would see like the younger Reggie Williams, like just popping, locking onto that song.
Well, that's one of the things I really admire about you. I know we come on here and we make jokes at each other from time to time, but and I think it's so, it's so cool about AFH is that we had a number of cooks in the kitchen, but it's not often like I was born in '84, so I missed all of that and had to kind of do the knowledge later. But to have somebody like you who lived through that, I mean, that was in your coming of age love affair with hip hop, those records were dropping, and I've heard you many times say that Melly Mel for a point in your life was your GOAT, that was your favorite MC. So to have that context, and it's amazing to me too, because I think that any hip hop journalist worth their salt knows the message, they know White Lines. But after that and throughout the years, you've really spotlit, even in just our conversations, the catalog long after Grandmaster Flash and the Furious Five was in vogue. You go with the deeper cuts that show that well into the late 80s, early 90s, Melly Mel still was putting it down. And I know I've seen Mel perform at SOBs at a Zulu Nation anniversary, and he is phenomenal to this day as an MC, as a stage performer. So I'm happy they get it. But you're right, it's revisionist history a little bit.
Yeah, but and not to take away from Flash either, because obviously he was pretty influential and in bringing DJ culture to the mainstream too. Like the Adventures of Grandmaster Flash on the Wheels of Steel was like a showcase of turntablism that people had not heard. Jazzy Jeff took it to a different level, bringing it back to the Fresh Prince when they dropped their albums. But before that, Flash was the standard bearer for turntablism. And there's that scene in Wild Style, that iconic scene where you're in Grandmaster Flash's kitchen, yeah, and he's going ham, like on the wheels, but to that song. But yeah, but ultimately, I'm very happy that they get this kind of recognition. I love seeing pioneers getting just due. I think that a lot of times they're overlooked. I think that a lot of people start their history with LL and Run DMC.
Yeah.
The Flash and the Furious Five, and Houdini and Fat Boys, and all those people before that are people who should be getting their flowers. And speaking of which, is Curtis Blow. Curtis Blow was of that era too, and for many, he was a father of hip hop. In fact, Run DMC was called Son of Curtis Blow. before he became known as Run. And
When he was his DJ, yeah.
yeah, when he was his DJ, yeah. And you know, Curtis Blow is a person who just had a heart transplant a couple weeks ago. You know, he had a pretty devastating heart attack back in 2016, survived that, had a surgery, a pretty major surgery in 2019, and eventually just needed a full blown transplant, which he got earlier this month. And it was successful. He's at home and recovering supposedly, but it's a reminder that you know we should give these guys their flowers while they're here, not wait till they are gone to celebrate them. You know, this is a guy who you know has songs like Basketball and The Breaks, and you know one of the seminal Christmas rap
Yeah,
songs, Christmas rapping. You know,
8 million
so
stories.
eight
I mean,
million
just joints.
stories.
Yeah.
Yeah, AJ, just you know,
Yeah.
total. He's got, you know, he was the biggest. He was LL before LLO. He was the first like, um, you know, pop, massive, successful solo artist in hip hop. You know, he was a guy who didn't have a DJ. You know, it wasn't DJ such and such and Curtis Blow. It
Yeah.
was Curtis Blow.
And
So
Curtis Blow's music has aged really well, in my opinion. I remember it was one of the greatest things that I remember MTV doing. And you might have been at Viacom at the time, but in '98, I was in 8th grade, just about to get ready for high school, and they took like a week to just dedicate to hip hop, and they ran a lot of produced documentaries, and they really they shined a light on Curtis Blow, on the Beastie Boys, on Run DMC, on a host of those guys. And for me, I mean, this was, you know, prime Cash Money, Rough Riders, you know, that era, Ruckus. And I just remember being exposed to that, you know, Curtis Blow's catalog in particular, and running out and buying, you know, the Mercury records, those compilations they used to do, like Essential Funk. And I just remember being a 13-year-old and Curtis Blow sounded so great. And to realize that he was the first gold selling,
yeah, yeah,
you know, soloist is, you know, in rap, was not surprising to me. I mean, just such command, and, you know, really a pillar of Harlem's, you know, hip hop history too.
absolutely. So some other legends that were recognized this week via another platform, and one that's come to like mean so much in 2020. It's one of the, you know, people talk about all the bad things that have happened in 2020. There have been some really great things that come of it too. And one of them is Verzuz, you know, the platform that Swiss Beats and Timberland created to showcase, you know, artists, rappers, producers, you know, who are legends. Like allow them to showcase their catalog in a fun, slightly competitive way against their peer. And last night was the final one of the year. Too Short versus E40 representing the Bay. But you know, what were your thoughts about that versus?
Man, I love it. These are two guys who are hip hop legends, and I know we throw that word around a lot, but I'm going to capitalize the L on this one. And what I love about it is you're absolutely right. Like 2020 has presented a new platform, apart from Clubhouse, that can, you know, change, that can really shine a light. And these are two artists who have cultivated careers without that light. I mean, Too Short, especially because he started, you know, some years before 40, you know, dealt with rejection from a lot of the late 1980s, you know, East Coast based hip hop magazines, you know, and was just trash for his rhyme style, and, you know, faced a lot of backlash. And 40, I feel like, is, you know, criminally slept on. I feel like he is, you know, in a lot of ways as innovative as your Cool G Raps, you know, but just because of Vallejo, California, because of the way that media is run, maybe because of production choices and things like that, just doesn't get the due. So to have everyone's attention on a Saturday night with a new album coming out, like a joint effort, which they've made collabo albums before, I just loved it. And then apart from that, it's a really good matchup. Like, I mean, these are guys that both have roots in the 80s. They were label mates for over 10 years. And then they both had this resurgence in the mid 90s, or excuse me, in the mid 2000s, because the guys in Atlanta and Miami were deeply inspired by them. You know, your T-Pains and your Little Johns and, you know, so on and so forth. So their catalogs have this nice, you know, kind of similar trajectory. And that really played out into, you know, the battle itself.
Yeah, you know, and there were some really cool moments too. Like this was reported to be the most expensive verses ever. You know, and they had the cars on the set, which was dope.
Live DJ.
Yeah, live DJ. Did you know? Did you know what kind of cars those were?
One looked like a Falcon, with like a mid late '60s Falcon, which is funny because that is a car, and I think the other one looked like a late '60s Mustang. Both of those cars, or is a Cougar, which is the same body, but those cars are like Bay Area cars, you know, like the same way the Cadillac is in Houston or in Philly. You know, you hear Black Thought always rapping about Bonnevilles and Buicks. Like, it was done to a T. And I don't know, you know, who foots that bill? Is that Verzuz? Is that Empire that puts out the album? I don't know, but it looked
Based
great.
on the huge Ciroc logo in the background, I'm assuming that that Mr. Diddy footed that bill. You know, there are rumors out there that it was the most expensive production and that was $500,000. You know, I've produced a lot of shows in my time, and I can tell you it was definitely not a $500,000
Yeah.
production, or if it was, somebody got beat. But maybe
Somebody got a brown bag. Yeah.
what it may have been was a $500,000 sponsorship. You know, that's often the case where you know, production could have been whatever it was, maybe 50,000, whatever. I don't know if there's travel and like COVID protocols make things more expensive too, because people gotta be tested. You gotta have people on set, like monitoring, making sure that people are observing all the protocols. There's a lot of stuff that COVID has brought that's expensive. But it wasn't a $500,000 production, but it was definitely an awesome production, you know, and cool to see these guys. You know, I love how E40 and Short, but both showed a lot of love to other Bay Area rappers, shouting out as many as they possibly could. You know, E40 saying that Tupac was the Bay Area's greatest rapper, I thought was pretty huge, you know, because people don't really think of Pac as people, I think, associate Pac with LA more than they do with the Bay, you know, given his Death Row affiliation and how hard he went, you know, in his later years. But he did start in the Bay, you know, it was
Marin County.
yeah, it was Digital Underground that gave him his start. And I think, speaking of dancers, Curtis Blow being the DJ for, you know, for Curtis Blow, Tupac was a dancer for Digital Underground. And so he got his home was the Bay. And if you listen to that early Pac, that revolutionary Pac, that Black Panther Pac, very much steeped in that Oakland sensibility, you know. And so to me, just the whole Verzuz was, you know, an ode to Bay Area hip hop as much as it was those two guys. It really, the two of them put that area on the map, and they represented it to the fullest last night. So, you know, I thought it was dope.
Yeah, and I mean, you know, those guys are unifiers, both of them. I mean, you know, I know people love to make a big to-do about, you know, E40's, you know, riding with Pac against Biggie, which, you know, never came to anything. But these are guys that collaborate with everyone. They've been very, you know, supportive of new generations, you know, like, you know, whether you're talking about G-Eazy or Jay Stalin or whomever, you know, these guys come in and they really are ambassadors of that culture. And yeah, I mean, just really, really great to see. E40 as a character. I've gotten to interview him a few times over the years, and incredibly thoughtful, incredibly generous with his time, brilliant businessman. I've never interviewed Short, but I've spent a little bit of time with him just in rooms and, you know, group conversations, and, you know, just a beacon of charisma. And that came out in the thing. You know, E40's name comes from his ability, as legend has it, to, you know, drain a 40-ounce on the quick and quickly grab another. And now he's, you know, obviously in the liquor and spirits business with Earl Stevens Winery. But he got a little toe up. And I saw some, actually our guy, Justin Hunt, the company man, posted like a little gif of 40 like deliberately stumbling back and forth. And it just made me laugh this morning.
Yeah, man. You know, another great thing that came out of it is they announced a forthcoming album featuring, you know, 40, Short, and Ice Cube and Snoop, called Mount Westmore. You know, I guess it may be a working title, but like that'll be amazing to kind of unite the OGs of Northern Cali and the OGs of Southern Cali on one album.
Man, I love this. Just as I'm sure our readers will say, I'll be the bad guy on this one. I'm always a little bit skeptical because, you know, we all remember those two incredible songs, Hello and Chin Check with Cube, you know, kind of like, hey, we'll bring NWA back without Easy. And no matter what, those are great records that live forever. You know, Snoop a few times in his career has assembled these super groups, some involving MC8, some involving J.O. Felony, King T, Goldie Loc, different people. There was Warzone, and I think the other one was First Generation, and they never They never delivered. But even if we get a dope 1 song or a 3-pack, I'll be happy with it. And we're also living in an age right now where those collaborations and those projects are a hell of a lot easier than they were even, 10 years ago. But whenever I see Cube's name involved, man, like that one, this could be really something special if it happens.
Yeah, for sure, for sure.
Yeah, man. So I mean, a lot happened too. You one of the things I wanted to ask you as we talk about the early days of hip hop and the pioneers is, breaking. I call it breaking because Crazy Legs checked me years ago. Other people might know it as break dancing, but it's now an Olympic sport. You mentioned, young Reggie Williams with Scorpio on. What does this mean for you, especially as somebody who I feel like more than me and my contextual lens got to watch Breakin' be the greatest show on earth?
It's interesting because you and I, we covered this on the site when they announced that it was under consideration. And I think at the time it was thought that it was kind of a done deal. It just needed to go through the stamp of approval and be official. I'm mixed about this one too, man. On the one hand, I love it when hip hop gets recognition from any kind of like global, platform, organization, whatever it may be. And the Olympics have been around for what, thousands of years now. And
Seems like it, yeah.
You've got so to have something that is that ingrained in human culture, recognize hip hop culture. And I think it's important we step back. We often very casually reference the music as hip hop, but hip hop is a culture, right? And comprised of 4 elements. A lot of people trying to sneak in the 5th being fashion. Is not the case. There are 4 elements of hip hop. It's MCing, DJing, breaking, and graffiti. And I've got it on my arm, and I'll show you out one day when I'm wearing a short sleeve shirt too, like the
yeah,
representation of the culture, right? So, I think that MCing has clearly become the most prominent extension of hip hop culture. DJing is probably second now, even though it started off as the first. Graffiti comes in and out. You'll get, it's more on an artistic level where you'll sometimes see street exhibits and things like that. Art Basel, you'll see it in museums. When Banksy is discussed, you'll get conversations about graffiti, but breaking has been one that had a huge rise in popularity in the early 80s. You have movies like, going back to Melly Mel, one of his best songs ever was Beat Street, the king of the beat. You see him rocking that beat from across the street. That film was a phenomenal representation of what breaking culture was in New York. And then you also had the West Coast version, which I love and many others love, but a lot of purists at the time, I think primarily probably people from New York who were really in the culture, had a visceral reaction against Breakin', the movie. I love Breakin'. I think everyone outside of New York loved Breakin', because for us, that was our first vision of it. And Turbo, who we've celebrated on the site a number of times in socials, and was like actually replied back to us, which was like a highlight for me. Ozone, people like that were just phenomenal. So having something that's so near and dear to me be represented. So it had that moment like in the 80s, and I'd say it's like a 2-year moment or so. And it's often the McDonald's commercial that like whenever it gets a McDonald's commercial,
yeah,
it's either gonna go, it's out of here and forever like going, or else it's reached the height of its fad nature, and like it has a plummet. And I think that for Breakin', once it kind of hit that like fever high pitch, it descended, and it never went away, but it became like jazz music and blues music and things like that. Something that just was a part of the culture that was present but never ever to become like mainstream again. But it's there. Rocksteady Crew has its festival every year, things like that, and it became an international sensation. You'd see
because it cuts through language, right?
Yeah, you'd see. So like the best break dancers or breakers would be from countries in Asia, and you saw like Red Bull picking it up and things like that. And dude, like the evolution is insane. Like people now can do stuff that it's just like watching, you know, Michael Jordan, you know, LeBron versus like a Bob Cousy or like you know, whoever back in the day. Like it's just a completely different game and level of athleticism. And so what they can do now, like puts like a lot of the guys from the '80s to shame. Like it is just it's sick if you look at it stuff on YouTube.
That's a really good point, because I feel like one of the things, and it goes to what you were just saying, like hip hop and really I feel like the mainstream that covers hip hop on the highest level, you know, in terms of exposure, has done not always a great job of covering the pioneers and showing the innovators with it. And you're absolutely right. If that happens with Breakin, what a shame to cover it at its point now and not do justice to, you know, the
Celebrate the history.
yeah.
Yeah. So you know, so it is athletic now. It is always athletic, but it's like it is showcasing like some of the world's finest athletes now. But there's something that still makes me wonder: should it be considered a sport? You know, it was definitely a competition, and it was a way to showcase like your dominance over like your competitors. And I guess that's what all athletics boil down to be. But something makes it feel like it's being um, gamified,
Yeah.
you know, now instead of like a part of a culture. Because it's part of a culture, I can't think of, you know, I guess some people would say that football is part of, you know, American culture and like and so forth. But so I don't know. I'm split. I'm happy to see the recognition, and I guess to your point, it really depends on how they handle it. If they showcase it in a way that respects the roots and you know the music and things like that, then great. If it seems you know corny for lack of a better word, then you know I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, I mean, I'm curious. I think that, you know, Breakin has a chance to be more universal sometimes than rapping or you know, scratching, you know, DJing or you know, graffiti, only because, like I said, it cuts through language. I mean, you can cut, you know, drums and, you know, do it in an interesting way, but there's always going to be, like when you watch DJ battles at DMC or, you know, ITF or whatever, there's always vocal elements in there. And I often think, you know, hip hop is an American art form. You know, I don't know how much we consider, you know, what's going on in Japan or what's going on in Eastern Europe or wherever. I mean, but dance is different, and it really gives an opportunity. And what I hope for is more recognition, hip hop being covered for other generations that are still, you know, learning to appreciate its merits. Because everyone watches the Olympics, you know, it seems like. And what I also hope too is it lights a fire under, you know, the American team, to go up and show and prove, you know, as the place where it comes from.
Yeah,
And at the
yeah.
same time bond with, you know, all those other countries that have taken it and really innovated.
So it has not come without controversy. You know, I mentioned Rocksteady Crew and what they've done. They were obviously prominently featured in Beat Street, and you know, for many, the most recognizable member of Rocksteady Crew is Crazy Legs, and so he is, as of now, going to be involved. I think as a judge or in some other capacity, but that's being called into question now amidst allegations of sexual harassment.
Man, I didn't even know that. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. You know, he's denied them, but you know, there is a petition that has been signed by many people, many alleging that he has harassed them over the years,
Mm.
pictures and other things, and so we'll see how that plays out. But you
Yeah.
know, regardless, you know, the fact that hip hop is once again on the main stage globally, I think is a phenomenal thing. And you know, we'll see how it plays out. I hope it's executed in a way that really respects the culture.
Absolutely, me too, man. You
Yeah.
know, so you know, President Barack Obama, you know, at an interesting time in American politics to begin with, you know, has released
But
a
wait,
new book.
before we
Oh
get to
yeah.
that, let you know, since we're on the sports category,
Oh
there was a
word.
major announcement related to baseball this week. So, and I know baseball is like, you know, cars and baseball are your two passions. People may
Man,
be
yeah.
Steelers, but like, but you know, and by the way, the last 2 weeks, what's going on? But anyway, Sorry.
Yeah.
I'm gonna hit you in the
Hey
gut.
man, fair is fair.
Baseball, there's some major news announced this week.
Yeah, and it's funny you mentioned kind of the revision history that the Grammys are doing and putting the hip hop pioneers in. According to the Bleacher Report, the stats of the Negro Leagues are now going to be considered along with, traditional MLB. And that's really, really, really important because if you know anything about the history, what players in, the Negro Leagues accomplished is remarkable with less resources, shorter benches, things like that. And it's funny when I saw that news, I thought of ultramagnetic MCs. On the Four Horsemen album, they have a really dope joint. And Kool Keith is actually a huge baseball fan. And when I interviewed him last year, we talked a lot about baseball. He doesn't miss a Yankees game and all that. But the joint, of course, was Saga of Dandy, the Devil, and Day. And if anyone isn't familiar with the hardships and the crazy circumstances that these athletes like Cool Papa Bell, Satchel Paige, Josh Gibson, so on and so forth endured, listen to that song. I mean, it really, and I love the fact that, we have hip hop voices that told that history. So I love that. And you mentioned the Steelers. I mean, being a Pittsburgh native, we had the Homestead Grays and the Pittsburgh Crawfords, which are two legendary teams in, let's be honest, I mean, Pittsburgh isn't New York or LA. So there's a lot of really important history in my backyard, literally right now, where that took place. So I just think it's great. I've been to the Hall of Fame 2 times, and I would love to go back if there's a special exhibit.
Yeah, no, I think it's an amazing thing. Again, it's validation. That's the theme of today's show. I think that, obviously there's some of the greatest baseball players to ever live. There was a fear of them. Many people know that Jackie Robinson wasn't necessarily the most talented of the players there. He was obviously talented. But he was the ambassador. He was the one who fit the profile the best and who they thought could assimilate into the league in a way that was tolerable for fans, but also representative for Black folks. And so, but Satchel Paige and so many other greats could have easily had that spot and come in and had tremendous impact as well. So
guys that pitched every single day. I mean, now we have 5-guy rotations, but Satchel Paige would do, not only would he play, but he would raise money because there wasn't a lot of money in Negro Leagues. But he would do these like barnstorming campaigns where he would show up in a town almost as a sideshow act, and they would show how fast he could throw a ball or he could hit a certain object because he was that precise. And now, because of health concerns and Tommy John surgeries and all of that, in this modern era, pitchers especially are really kind of, I won't say coddled, but they're really protected, and none of that happened back then. And then you think about it, these guys would play their hearts out, sometimes 2-3 games a day, and then have to travel really far away to find a hotel that would accept them. And we're going to talk about, I'll mention it, as we talk about, Obama's, press campaign. But I listened recently on Fresh Air. They revisited a piece on Satchel Paige. And if anyone's a baseball fan, I encourage them to listen to it, because as you and I use a lot, the word perspective, like when you understand what Satchel Paige went through, it'll really make you appreciate him differently in a conversation with, Cy Young and the other, incredible pitchers in history.
That's really dope. That's really dope. So yeah, you mentioned Obama's press campaign, and he was on Jesus and Mero this past week. I've been watching it. I think one of the earliest things I saw in this campaign, and I don't think I even realized it was for the campaign at that point for his new book, was Uninterrupted. He did that show with LeBron and Maverick Carter. Shot incredibly well, and just seeing the press interact with LeBron like that was amazing. That one though was done in separate locations. He wasn't in the shot with them. They all kind of did it remotely. For this one, he was on Jesus and Mero, and it was shot at Howard and their library, Howard University, in their library. And seeing the three of them, those dudes and their Timbs and like, I think they had on Timbs, I can't remember. And they expected him to come in Timbs and sneakers. He had said that he might.
Yeah.
It was really amazing, and just seeing, first of all, just for them, what a huge look it is. He said, y'all blew up. And obviously they had, because otherwise he wouldn't be on the show. And for these guys to have started with a podcast, 7-8 years ago, and grow it into a franchise that now features the former president of the United States, is amazing. But then for him to be as laid back as he is, they call him Barack and Barry often throughout the show. Never do they call him Mr. President, and it's not a lack of respect. It's a familiarity that he has like welcomed, and just to see them sit back and speak as men as opposed to the formal thing was great. And he's like, he's giving them shit like throughout, like he's like, they showed some basketball highlights of Jesus and Merrill playing against Cory Booker, and they're shooting air balls left and right. And he says, well, the good news is you guys can still be on the Knicks,
yeah.
He like hammers the Knicks a few times. I'm imagining Chuck Dolan is like feeling kind of some kind of way after seeing that, but it's tremendous, man. So for them, it's a great look. Again, it is another validation for hip hop, right? Like for the president of the United States or former president to go on these platforms that are so unapologetically hip hop shows the power that it has, and he's clearly trying to reach a certain audience. He's very calculated about that. It's very targeted, I'm sure.
But he never panders. I mean, that's what's so dope. And even at times when over those 8 years, I think where people were critical of Barack Obama just for little and big things, but like he never is inauthentic. And more than any person I can think of in my lifetime,
That's true. But also, like, he does adjust how he behaves for different audiences.
Mm-hmm.
And he also throws in like little codes here and there. Like we all knew what him brushing his shoulder meant, like back in the day. But the people in the audience at the time might not have. We knew that was a reference to, dirt off his shoulder, the Jay-Z thing. You can see when he's in a black church, he adopts a slightly different cadence, and when he's at Ben's, things like that. It's not inauthentic. It's just like how when I'm talking to my mom, my cadence gets slower, like a little bit of a Southern accent comes out, like Midwestern thing comes out. Like when you're with your high school friends, you kind of speak a bit more like you did when you were with them. When you're on the East Coast in New York, you'll talk a little bit different. It's not inauthentic. And I wouldn't even say it's code switching. I'll just say that we all kind of are impacted by our environment and showcase different things to different people. We talk differently to our parents than we do to our friends. It is what it is. And so it was cool to see Obama let his guard down a little bit and let that hip hop side of him come out a little bit. He was talking about an artist, I can't remember, some artist that he's listening to, but clear. He's in touch with the culture, and we've always known that, So that was fun. Oh, it was Nas. They talked about how Nas came in to the White House, and he was talking about how great Nas was and all that. So that was awesome, man. It was really awesome to see. It's interesting too because previously that was a spot that would have gone to Sway. He's done a number of interviews with Sway, and so for him to have gone to them this time almost seems like there's a bit of a changing of the guard, or at least he's ushering in a new generation of hip hop journalists, and and giving them that cosign, and so that was dope to see too.
Yeah, I didn't see Jesus and Miro, but I watched his conversation with Speedy Morman from Complex, which took place at Ben's Chili Bowl, another DC landmark. And it was really great to see. I mean, I've contributed some to Complex and known a lot of the editors and staff over the years. So to watch them get that look, and Obama really was personable with Speedy, like clearly had done his research, knew a thing or two. And that conversation was catered to Complex, and their demographic. It sounds, with the Tims and ones, Jesus and Miro would fit. And then at the same time, I listened to his conversation both with Terry Gross and Fresh Air, which is the NPR crowd. And then I listened to him on his wife's podcast. He was the first guest. And every one of those things, you're exactly right. Of the 3 or 4 that I listened to were very curated to that crowd and that conversation without being inauthentic. And it amazes me the wealth of knowledge, from all of the important things that we don't know about, all the classified information, but down to sports and music that, Barack Obama is aware of.
Yeah, and so another person on a really interesting press run right now is Pharrell. Pharrell has just dropped a line of skincare products, which when you think about authenticity, like Pharrell and skincare, like everyone talks about this guy looking like a vampire, because not in a bad way, in that he doesn't age. This guy looks almost exactly the same that he did 20, 30 years ago. And he's
in the Rex Effects video, yeah.
Yeah, and he's creeping up on 50,
Yeah,
right? He's in his mid 40s. Like, he's not a young dude. He's not an old dude, but he's not a young dude. But he looks phenomenal. Part of it is, he keeps his hair blonde, so dudes might get flack for throwing the black in there, but you throw the blonde in there and it's
you get away with it.
It's all good, right? Exactly. So that's part of it, and it keeps his facial hair very low too. But his skin is flawless. He shines, and so he's got a line of products out now, and he's done some traditional things. You see him on GQ, and that's to be expected. Interestingly, he did a video for Vogue for beauty secrets. It's typically a video vehicle that's reserved for women, showing their beauty routines and things like that. And he did it, and so it's really cool to see him doing something like that and showing guys it's okay to care about how you look and beautify, basically. But on the flip side, he also did Drink Champs. And on the one hand, okay, that's not so unexpected given his connection with Nori. They've made some phenomenal records, in the past, and have a clear relationship that extends 20 years now. But on the other hand, what Drink Champs is, getting hammered and smoking blunts and things like that, is kind of the opposite of what you think about with Pharrell. Because in one of those videos I saw, GQ or Vogue, he has said the only thing that he drinks is water, and there's a carbonated water that he drinks too, that's slightly flavored. But so effectively, he only drinks water products. But on Drink Champs, he actually imbibes. He's drinking Sancerre, he's drinking a concoction of tequila and something fruity and some other stuff. And it's 3 hours. I didn't see all 3 hours, but I think he probably felt the impact of that. And it's Pharrell in a way I've never seen before. Now, I've watched a lot of Pharrell interviews over the years, a lot. From I think Sway, Breakfast Club, or Rubin. I can't even remember. I've seen so many Pharrell interviews, and he's always kind of at one speed. He's very intellectual, very cerebral, somewhat nerdy. He's definitely engaging. He smiles and all that, but this was a different kind of Pharrell.
This ain't Oprah's couch.
No, he was laid back and open and coming with it. So it was just really tremendous to see, him in that light.
I want to give just Drink Champs a shout out right now, because you and I were early covers of the show. I mean, we have relationships with both EFN and Nori over the years. And when that show kind of emerged, we really extracted the Ambrosia out of those conversations, and to watch them make their partnerships and grow. They talk about it on air. Nori has admitted frustration with not necessarily getting A-list artists, A+ list artists. Drake has yet to sit on the Drink Champs, hot seat, and the like. We haven't seen J. Cole on there. We haven't seen Kendrick. But what they've done this season, especially, that I've really enjoyed, is they've taken artists that, might not be household names, never got a Grammy, maybe never even had a gold record, and they've really told their stories with accessibility and care. And this year, especially in the middle of quarantine and pandemic, recently, like Royal Flush, Mike Geronimo, most before Pharrell, the episode was Cormega, And I've listened to these, and they're 3-hour interviews, but they're that engaging and captivating. Those guys, they deserve recognition, because there's a lot of people that are chasing clickbait in long form podcast interview space, and they're not that. And at the same time, you're still going to get salaciousness, especially when there's alcohol or other things involved. But I've really, really enjoyed them taking artists that mean a lot to me and unpacking their story properly.
Yeah, me too. I'm a huge fan. Gotten to know Fan pretty well personally over the last few years. Really, really great stand-up dude. Met Nori on a few occasions. I love that they rep just who they are. They keep it 100. They keep it a buck every single time they sit down with people. They don't, they are who they are. And I think that, I've talked about this a lot. That's a show where you always have to tune into the last hour or so.
Oh yeah. That's when it gets tuned up.
That's when it gets turned up. You get the facts out there. So it's pretty dope.
Speaking of big Drink Champs guests over the last year, Lil Wayne, and that was a huge get for those guys, and a great interview, regardless of where you stand on Wayne's music. I thought that was a phenomenal interview. I'd never seen Wayne in that capacity. Not confirmed as far as we understand, but a big news story this week is that Wayne may have sold his publishing for a reported $100 million. And that includes a lot of the masters that he would have held for Young Money artists, which obviously includes parts of the catalog of Drake and Nicki Minaj. You have a lot of history in entertainment law, and you understand things in a way that I don't. Whether it's true or not, I mean, what do you think of that?
It's interesting because a lot of times you hear as the epitome of a bad deal when an artist gets, taken for their publishing. They say that they stole my publishing, or they took my publishing. It's often cited as an indicator of something of huge value that was inappropriately taken from it. So to see it flip now and see artists selling it is interesting. So, another high-profile deal that happened in the last couple of weeks is Bob Dylan recently sold his publishing to Universal Music Group, and I think it's rumored that Wayne may have sold to UMG also. Universal Music Group is by far the biggest music company in the world, biggest on the recording side, biggest on the music publishing side as well. And Wayne has had a relationship with them for the entirety of his career through Cash Money. Cash Money had a pressing and distribution deal for a good portion of time, which is they
still do, I think.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I don't know if it's still a pressing and distribution deal or just more of a standard deal. The difference being that with the pressing and distribution deal, you basically just have the label distribute your music, and you give them 15% or so, and you keep the lion's share of your royalties, but you're on the hook for marketing and promotion and all the other things that would make it successful. Under the Cash Money had that kind of deal. No Limit had that kind of deal, and I believe the Cash Money did too. A more standard recording agreement is you flip those economics, and the label keeps the lion's share of the profit, but in exchange for that, they pay for everything, and then you ultimately pay for it. Yourself, you got to recoup it, but they'll advance the cash for that in order to allow you. And a lot of times that's the biggest stumbling block for people, is having the capital to get out there and get their stuff to the masses. It's not if you build it, they will come kind of thing, because there's so much competition. You got to be able to market savvily, all that stuff. So Universal's the biggest, and Wayne has been affiliated with Cash Money, who's always been affiliated with Universal, and so it makes sense if you were to sell it. They're the biggest, and they have that relationship. There are different structures of deals. Sometimes you can sell it outright, and you just get a big check, and that's it. Everyone shakes hands, parts ways, and goes their separate ways. And in that case, the company that made the acquisition is able to do with the publishing what they want. They'll place it in TV shows, commercials, things like that. Sometimes when you see a placement on a commercial and be like, wow, like, I can't believe that person did that. Oftentimes it's their publisher doing it.
Right.
And that they need money or whatever it might be. So there's that aspect. And then every time songs are played on the radio, in football stadiums, things like that that get money for that too. There's a lot of different income streams for publishing, which is why it's so valuable.
I'm just curious to ask you though, not sorry to interrupt, but I mean, right now, anyone who's a fan of music has heard their favorite artist bemoan the value of music right now, because we're no longer living in, a purchasing relationship with our artists. I mean, we are possibly with merchandise and touring, tickets, things like that, which is obviously on hold this year. But, apart from your Adeles and Taylor Swifts, I don't know many people that go buy, rap CDs anymore, or CDs, period. I know there's a vinyl culture that thrives. Do you think that the value is going to change in the future, and that's why companies like Universal and this other company that allegedly went in and bought Timberland's catalog and the Dreams, that the value system is going to change with what you're talking about?
Well, so that's the thing. So, publishing has always been considered, more valuable than what you get paid for the recording. And, a lot of people don't, it's a really nuanced thing. So the recording is the specific version of the song that was recorded. So, Lil Wayne's A Milli, that record that he made for Carter 3 is the record. If someone else were to re-record that, Wayne wouldn't get paid for that record, but he would get paid for the publishing, which is the song. So the words, the composition, that's the publishing.
And that's why you see legacy artists, a lot of times like 70s, 80s R&B, they'll go and re-record their stuff to generate the new record.
Exactly. Yeah. So that they own that recording.
Yeah.
Because so if someone else does a cover of A Milli, they get paid for the record, their version of it, but Wayne gets paid for their usage of the song, and the lyrics and all that other stuff. So publishing, and is incredibly valuable in that way. It used to be that records were, once you bought the album or the CD or whatever it was, you didn't really get money from the record again. But now in the streaming era, people get paid per play for the record too. So records are now, that's why you're seeing like legacy artists, when they do Verzuz and things like that, will start getting paid more again, because every time someone streams that record, they get paid for it now under the new system. So there's a bit of evening out with the value of records and recordings and publishing. But again, because other people can do your songs too on the publishing side, it's still a bit more valuable. But your question, so in theory, if someone buys your publishing, they're doing so because they believe that they can extract more value from it over the long term than the money they're paying you. That's the simple truth. If they didn't think that it was going to be worth more than they're paying, they wouldn't buy it. Because why else would you want it, just for vanity's sake? And so, while Wayne might get a huge payday, if she were to keep it and also be able to aggressively market it and use it like a publishing company would, in theory, he would make more money by keeping it than he would by selling it. But there's a lot of factors. Maybe
it's less responsibility too, right?
It's responsibility. It's a lot of work. It's a skill set. You got to hire people to do it. Typically, you'd have to pay them a percentage, and you're balancing that out. So, you can see why he would do it. The question though is, and I think this speaks to your question, is what's the shelf life of a song? And so like a Bob Dylan. His music has lingered for 50 years now, and there's a generation that considers him to be the greatest songwriter of all time. I think he was, he never, I think he's gotten, he might have gotten a Pulitzer, but no, I think Kendrick was the first non-classical jazz artist to get a Pulitzer. But Bob Dylan has gotten something of that ilk before. And so, but the question is, once the generation who came up with Bob Dylan, is no longer around, will people still be listening to Bob Dylan music? I'm not sure. Well,
and I think yes. I mean, because you look at Bob Dylan's, songs, Times They Are a Changin', or those are associated with the times they were made in, and I think that that's true of Wayne too. If you want to know what 2007, 8, or 9 were like in a certain subsect of young culture, you're going to need a Millie, you're going to need, Lollipop or whatever. And I mean, Wayne's catalog, it's not just exclusive to those 2 years. I think he's a touchstone of our times. And I think that, when people remember that, and that's why I think it has value, also true of Timberland.
Yeah, that's an interesting thought. Like, some rap music doesn't age well. You talked about Curtis Blow's music aging well, but
And that's my opinion. Yeah.
I think it does. Like the breaks and things like that. Some songs like September, Earth, Wind and Fire go generation to generation to generation. They're just they're baked into the culture. Most songs don't do that. Most songs are very, very of the moment and tied to the time. And so, yeah, if you're doing a retrospective or a film set in a certain era or something like that, you want that. But otherwise, you're not going to hear that song on classic radio or whatever it might be. Will Lil Wayne's and Millie be on oldsters radio in 30 years? I don't know. It's interesting. Songs like Cream and by Wu-Tang,
Juicy,
Juicy are now. Those are songs that you'll hear on classic hip hop.
And you see them license places. It was a few years ago, like 10, but I mean, The Choice Is Yours by Black Sheep, was licensed to a car commercial. And it's funny right now, G Code by the Ghetto Boys was in that Chrysler commercial with Dr. Dre in it. And now right now there's a Cadillac commercial with, I think, DJ Shadow and Run the Jewels, instrumental. So you're starting to see brands that are trying to tap our culture, and they're doing it through cues.
Yeah.
And, Wayne's a touchstone like that. So
yeah, I mean, Wayne, for a 2 or 3 year span, he was the biggest artist in rap music.
Yeah.
Without question. And so does he have records that will be played 20, 30 years from now? I think for sure. How much is that worth? Is it worth 100 million?
Yeah.
Is it worth 50? What's it worth? Who knows? But the people who do this for a living have very sophisticated ways of valuing catalogs, and so I'm sure they did all their numbers, and whatever number they came up with is definitely bigger than what was paid, I'm sure.
And Wayne deserves value. I mean, regardless of anyone's opinion on him, I believe that Wayne caught a bad deal for so many years. And just because he and Cash Money settled and Wayne is now, his own business, doesn't mean that he received the money that, the headlines said that they settled for, right? I mean, I'm asking, the game is the game. And Wayne's impact on culture, his reign, if you decide that this is worth more in somebody else's hands than it is to you, take the money. I just want, and this is a recurring thing that we're talking about a lot, we talked about on the site, I just want, hip hop artists to be not in a position of struggle. And I know that Wayne is, an A-list artist, but still, if that was what made sense, go do it, man. And, I always think of the story, when Dre parted with Death Row, he needed to sell his recordings to Suge for an amount. It couldn't be gifted. So it was like $1. And all of the things that he created while at Death Row were retained by the label, and he went and started Aftermath. And you look now, I mean, damn near 25 years later, Dre made the right move. He got off of a dangerous and sinking ship. And I think later on, he's now, reacquired the Chronic and things like that. But, sometimes those things that look like losses are much bigger victories down the line.
Yeah, I agree with you. Ultimately, it's a personal decision, one. Yeah. And two, it's about how you invest your money. So let's say that, it is $100 million, right? And Universal can take that $100 million and flip it into $300 million over time. That's phenomenal for them. Maybe Wayne says, look, I couldn't have done that, but I can take this $100 million and I'm going to do like Nas and like, and others, and invest my money in tech companies and things like that.
Real estate,
and
whatever.
I can flip it into a billy. And so ultimately, it's on them to assess that. But yeah, it is interesting. It's a real interesting thing to see. And to my knowledge, it's the first, if it is true, because it's all like alleged, first major hip hop catalog acquisition by an artist, of an artist. I can't think of any other.
Well, Timberland, but I mean, Timberland might transcend into pop, especially given his production role.
Yeah, and he's a producer. Like
Right.
I mean, artist really. So I can't think of an artist whose catalog was acquired of this stature.
Like this. Yeah. We'll
Yeah,
see if it comes to fruition.
yeah, yeah. So a Tribe Called Quest, so Phife has got an album. They put out a tweet saying that his album that was reported just shortly after his death, is finally coming out in 2021. What were your thoughts about that? Did you see that announcement?
I did, and I'm pleased with it. I mean, we knew that Fife had an album. I worked with Fife for a period of time in the early 2010s. Just he became a contributor at Hip Hop DX, where I was the editor in chief, and even then he was plugging away on this album. And I think we heard, on Combat Jack, God Bless the Dead. There's confirmed collaboration with Redman, Fife, and Busta Rhymes, which sounds insane. Like, a lot of people have talked about this album. So to now see it be in the hands of a Tribe Called Quest to release with Fife's, estate, I like that. I mean, that's going to give that album, I think, an extra boost of attention. And, Q-Tip, Ali Shaheed Muhammad, phenomenal producers, I think, to go over everything, sign off on it. Because nothing hurts more than when a really meaningful artist, some posthumous material comes out and it's just not on point. So I'm happy with this. And I think it carries on that sentiment of family that we saw so strongly, in the last 5 years with the obviously the album.
Yeah, I heard a couple of things too, and I remember really liking the stuff that I heard. Five sounded in real, kind of. He sounded like in fighting form, like
Mm-hmm.
really like great. And so I hope that the beats are good, because a lot of times with these, they have the vocals, but they don't have the beats, or they recorded it and it's because it's been recorded for quite some time. It sounds dated. I think that Busta Rhymes has shown that if you have the right records, they will transcend, any kind of time and sound, and you just make your sound. So, but I'm hopeful. I agree.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't want something to come out that tarnishes musical legacy.
So an album that you liked at the beginning of 2020, it's not on our list. I mean, because a lot of great music came out, but Eminem made Music to Be Murdered By. And one of the biggest artists there is, period, released, as many artists are doing now. We talked about Deontay Hitchcock last week. There's a number of artists that are coming out later in the year or shortly after their projects, releasing basically a whole nother album, an addendum to it. M did that with this album. Have you had a chance to listen to that?
I haven't. I didn't even realize it was out. I'll definitely take a listen to it. It's interesting. Eminem's albums, speaking of shelf life, to me don't seem to have a lot of shelf life as of late. His last 2 or 3 albums,
Yeah.
listened to a couple of times and then haven't gone back to them. So we'll see.
Yeah, and I mean, this one, the most noteworthy aspect of it is, DJ Premier does the scratches, and it's a heavy Premier presence. It's more than just like a zigga zigga here. But he didn't produce the track, as I understand, but on there. Yeah, I mean, if you like the first one, it's a lot more of the same. I mean, M is a sharp MC. I listened to it over the weekend. I can't knock it, but I have to say that, I'm at a point in life where, genitalia punchlines and things like that just don't strike me. And that's kind of the headspace M is at right now. And he's dealing with a lot of production. Ty Dolla $ign's on the album. M is again inserting himself into, I think, a popular sound right now. And maybe I'm an old backpacker, but I always liked M more as a leader than a follower. And I don't say that as a diss. I just think he's capable of blazing his own lane versus trying to merge a few lanes together to accommodate everyone. But that's my take.
Well, in terms of blazing lanes, a couple of trailblazers dropped some Lucy's this week. One was Doom. He had a track with Flying Lotus producing it and Thundercat playing on it, which I think is fire. It's called Lunch Break. I was really desperately trying to add it to the playlist. It's not available on DSPs, which is like, that's a head scratcher to me.
Doom's elusive like that, though.
Yeah, well, I gotta think that this is the people that put it out, but like it's available on YouTube.
Mhm.
So check that out. It's called Lunch Break, and it is from the Grand Theft Auto Cayo Perico soundtrack. Then the other is one you sent to me as Song of the Day, Madlib, Road to the Lonely Ones, which I thought
Yeah.
was a pretty dope record too.
Man, I mean, Madlib has put out so many of these albums that even people that may love Bandana or, love some of the things that Madlib's done on a higher level are still getting to, his whole Beat Conductor series. And as I understand it, Road of the Lonely Ones is the first song of a upcoming collaboration with Fortet, but it's not listed that way on the song. I read that in an article. No matter what, it's just a really, it's a groove. And, Madlib has been so deft at, on one hand, making joints with Guilty Simpson and Strong Arm Steady, but on the other, making, crazy records with Badu. And this kind of toes that line. It's an instrumental record. I saw some people, I think Jeff Weiss, who's one of my favorite writers, really compared it to the stride that Dilla was in with Donuts. And yeah, that has been my most played song of the week, hands down.
An artist that you and I both know and love, Murs, dropped his Love and Rockets Volume 2. Always look forward to a Murs album. Been
He's given us like 10 of them this year, man.
he's been on a tear this year, which is fantastic.
Yeah, he released a video with that for the DOC, which is my favorite joint on the album. Great to see, and then the video really kind of pays tribute to LA street organizations. And also about that album, which one point I want to make, the first Love and Rockets, which I know you and I both, really liked. And I'd known Murs at a distance from years, but when he released the first one, I had a crazy day I spent with Murs and Dame Dash up in up around your way, up above New York City. That was really cool. And Ski Beats. Ski produced that whole album. This one is produced by DJ Fresh, who people may know from his Tonight Show series with like Currency and Mitchie Slick and, I think Freddie Gibbs, a bunch of different artists. So still Murs, but a little deviation there.
Yeah. And Pharoah Monch drops new stuff too?
Yo, I mean, Pharoah's been talking for years about this album that he had been working on that is very inspired by Ozzy Osbourne, Black Sabbath, a lot of metal stuff. And I think this is the third joint we've had on it. It might be number 4. I have to believe that he meant this Project 13, which, has Marcus Machado on it. I mean, they're part of the band Daru Jones, both of whom I believe are in Pete Rock's Soul Survivors band. I think Parks from the Joe Budden podcast is involved. But this joint, you can hear the Black Sabbath influence all over it. That, as we really celebrate like Black Thought and Royce and Gibbs and these other guys that have just been doing it consistently for so many years, I think 2021 we're going to really clear the aisle and give Pharoah Monch more flowers than he's received in a really long time. I just predict that.
Yeah, I love the response that we get for every Pharoah post. He's such a dope MC, such a dope artist. It's been one of my favorites for decades now. And he's also one like Royce and Black Thought, who I think continues to get better.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, I'm excited.
Yeah, that joint, that's a rugged one, for sure. Yeah.
And so anything else?
Yeah, I mean, it's been a good time in music. Obviously, Short and 40 put out the project with the album, some songs together. It's kind of like a dual album, like you would get back in the 90s when they would take 2 artists and mix them. And I mentioned at the top of the podcast, we caught some flack for not including Conway, From a King to a God in our year end. And great album, very, very near to my list. Juvenile Hell with Havoc. That's my favorite Havoc beat in so long. Lloyd Banks kills it, and Flea Lord. But he re-released it with 5 more songs, including production from two Derringer joints, a joint from Ninth Wonder, a joint from Rock Marciano, and Hitmaker, who is making hits and people may not know or may know that's Young Berg's kind of he MF doomed himself a little bit and kind of came back to the game under a new moniker. I really enjoyed that, and if that's a reason for anyone to revisit From a King to a God, do it up.
Word. All right, so.
Can I say one more thing? I just want to acknowledge, rest in peace to Gangsta Rid from Booyah Tribe. Booyah Tribe Man, I mean, you talk about hip hop's enforcers, right? Like there's always, the Bumpy Knuckles, the Just Ices, even Drake has Back and Not Nice. Every movement has these guys that I truly believe are as greater MCs than they are, imposing figures. But the Booyah Tribe, people know because they were Eminem's bodyguards for a time. They were Eazy-E's bodyguards, I believe. These guys came in the mid 2000s when Suge was in and out of jail and kind of helmed the death row sound for the Dysfunctional Family soundtrack. But Booyah Tribe, I mean, let's not forget, these guys were on Island Def Jam. They put out Funky New Nation. They were great MCs that loved hip hop and are pioneers, especially for Samoan culture, bringing that to hip hop. We lost Godfather a few years ago and now Gangsta Rid, who I never met, but, I saw a lot of tribute posts from Crooked Eye and Ice-T and different people. And from all that I understand was just a great individual. And we'd be remiss if we didn't talk about that. I hate to see any of our heroes go. And from what I heard, not confirmed, but I did hear grumblings that it may have been COVID related, which, we've lost a few great ones this year to the pandemic.
Yeah, man. Rest in peace to him and to all those that we lost this year. It has been a very, very tough year in that regard, but we got a new one coming, and I hope that next year brings like great things for all of us. It's definitely not going to flip the switch in January, but I hope that this time next year we look back on this and it is a distant and it's a distant memory for us. So
yeah,
but yeah.
So what's your song of the week, man?
My song of the week, I was late on the Salt tip, SAULT, but I love that album. Been listening to it a lot, heavy rotation.
Both of them are great albums.
Yeah, Rise, I love both albums, but Rise, Untitled Rise is the one that has resonated with me the most so far. There's a song called Sunshine, SON Shine, and they got a lot of gospel influence, gospel chords, gospel harmonies, but another kind of recurring theme, and Questlove, I believe, said this was his favorite album of the year. Is it sounds? I said it was Quincy Jones, very Quincy Jones inspired from like the Michael Jackson Off the Wall Thriller era, which would explain the Quest gravitation toward it. It's also got a lot of tribal heavy drums, but a friend of mine took it even deeper and said that Rod Temperton was the keyboardist and for Quincy on those records and a producer in his own right and almost like a co-producer of those albums. And if you listen to the Sunshine, you'll hear a lot of Baby Be Mine from the Thriller album, number 2 on that album. A lot of that bass line, that keyboard bass line is reminiscent of that. So that song has been like stuck in my head for a while. Man,
I played both songs this week, but not back to back. So I'm gonna run do that.
Yeah.
Mine, it's funny. Every year it seems like, since before playlisting was a thing, Barack Obama has released his songs of the year. And you and I think we can say like for a lot of years, we saw a lot of our competitors at AFH cover that and make big to do. And you and I both kind of, this is cool, but it's not necessarily news to us because it happens every year. But I was looking at his list, for 2020, which was great. He gave shine to J. Cole, Snow on the Bluffs, gave shine to a Goody Mob album, which a lot of hip hop journalists don't know exists, that came out with a 3 Stacks verse. But he had a joint on there that I had played, but not on its own. And I hope I'm saying it right. Iala, it's bracketed as Family by Spillage Village with JID and Earth Gang. And man, what a powerful record. And I love what Spillage Village, JID, Earth Gang, truly, all of Dreamville does when they can make songs that are not just bars, but still feel like hip hop and reach you to a very relatable place. So Spillage Village, another album that very easily could have made my top 20. I know you and I was like, yo, make sure you listen right before the end of the year. Great album, but definitely been in heavy rotation this week. And that song just speaks everywhere I'm coming from.
That's dope. Well, another good thing that came out of 2020 for me is this show. You know, you and I have always been more behind the scenes dudes. We don't like being like on the video dancing, like you know,
Twitter tweeting.
Some of our friends were doing exactly. But being able to connect like this through conversation on hip hop has been a highlight for me. And you know, so thank you for always like educating me and engaging. And thank you to those who've listened to us regularly, who've listened this far. And we're going to take a break for a couple weeks. We'll be back fresh in January with season 2. What's the headline? And,
season 3.
Yeah, season 3. Right.
Yeah.
Right. So, and you know, but looking forward to it. And Happy New Year, Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, all that stuff. And yeah.
Everybody stay safe. Thank you so much. And when there's something to talk about, we'll be here to talk about it.
For sure.
Word.
Right. Peace.
Peace.